Everyone, we're going to get started in just a minute. I'm still seeing some participants being added, so as soon as my number stops going up, we'll get going. Okay, I think that might be everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Josh Smith, and I'm the assistant to the general president for the Training, Education, and Grants Department at the IAFF. Without, too much detail, most everyone on the call probably realizes that SAFER and our FP&S grants have been delayed, typically an early springtime event. But with the changes in the administration, they've gotten pushed to kind of this area. And we really have just been waiting on FEMA. Most of you have gotten some communication from us. Trying to, it takes us some time. Every time they push out the new applications or the notice of funding opportunity, our staff has to break all that down and be able to get information to you. Those of you that have interacted with us so far or sent us narratives, we're working diligently to get through those. Our team typically turns those around in 24 to 48 hours. So those of you who have worked with us so far, thank you. Those of you who are on just for informational purposes, thank you as well. And if you have questions after, staff will be around to answer it. I'm going to introduce you to my team. There have been a lot of changes to really the funding mechanisms and the way that there's cost share and there's some history there that is very important for this call. And my team's going to walk you through that. Um, First, I'll introduce Director Jamie Burgess. He is the Director of Training and Grants for the IAFF. And next is Mark Oshry. Mark is one of our grant specialists and longtime grant reviewer for the IAFF. Dennis Hulberg is also on, and all of these folks are fantastic, lots of experience, and they'll be here to answer questions. I will also be around. Feel free to. I think what the plan is to get us through the presentation, and then we'll certainly take questions if there's time. So, without further ado, Jamie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Smith, and thank you everybody for being on this afternoon. Just to kind of echo what Dr. Smith was saying, back in December of 2024, we did a webinar that was really designed to be an overview of the SAFER program as a whole, kind of what it is, what it's designed for. I'm going to drop a link to that webinar in the chat so that you can go back and review it at a later time. But the webinar today is focused specifically on the fiscal year 2024 SAFER funding announcement. As Dr. Smith said, there were some significant changes compared to previous years SAFER. For those of you who have been around for a while, specifically around the cost share provisions, you may be familiar with those. Those are coming back. So we're going to walk everybody through the fiscal year 2024 funding announcement. And as I said, I'm going to drop the link to the webinar we did back in December into the chat so that you can go to our YouTube channel and check that out. So with that, Mark, I will go ahead and turn it over to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Hey, Jamie, I'll just add to that with the previous presentation. We didn't know there was going to be the cost share, so a lot of the discussion didn't have mention of the cost share in there. So we'll get to some of that changes through the presentation, and then we can address anything that needs to later there. So let me just share our PowerPoint. Let me share my screen. So again, we're talking about the FY20 SAFER application. Oops, second. This just wants to cooperate with me. Excuse me for a second. Oh no. Let's start with technical difficulties. Sorry about this. Okay, here we go. So the disclaimer is this presentation is designed to help locals and applicants apply. It does not replace or modify any of the FEMA official documentation. As we key is, this is our suggestions and recommendation. That doesn't mean this is gospel and this will be fact as stated. This is our interpretation of a lot of this information. So the IAFF, as stated, we provide a lot of grant assistance to IAFF locals. One of the biggest things we do is grant review narrative. Review your narratives before you submit them to FEMA. We go through them. There's a few of us that do this, make comments and suggestions as a reviewer would look at them to give you the most competitive application. We will do post-submission reviews. It's not really recommended. It's a lot easier before you submit it than tell you what you did wrong afterwards or make suggestions. To get this done, and we'll say this a few times here, the local president must send us a request to have this done. We'll work with anybody within the department or somebody else that's writing it for you, but it has to come from the local president to the IAFF, sent to firegrants@iaff.org. And that's going to be the main level of communication to the international on grant information is firegrants@iaff.org. So say for FY24, application already started. It goes through July 3rd. So they give us a pretty good window this year to have this done. There's $324 million down from 360 last year. It's a 10% reduction. We do not know what in the future years are going to bring, but this current fiscal year is 10% down at $324 million. So a lot of people ask the question about, well, why should I apply? The volunteers or the accommodation get everything. 80% of the money is designed for career hiring, with 20% for R&R or volunteer hiring process. So it's in the statute that has to be set aside this way from Congress, that 10% goes towards R&R and 10% goes towards volunteer hiring. So 80% goes straight to career hiring, career only hiring. So it's a little bit about FY23. We saw 2,161 applications submitted to FEMA. Of those, 191 were awarded for 90 hiring applications and 101 recruitment retention. So roughly 9% were awarded. There was, however, $3.3 billion in requests for $360 million. So the need is out there. Unfortunately, the money just isn't, which is why we need to get a most competitive application we can. So how do I get started? So IAFF cannot directly apply, or an affiliate not directly apply for the grant, but you can influence and make help decision makers be aware of the grant process. You can generate the support you need in your department, in your town or city. Ask to be part of the process. In many communities, the IAFF member is the grant writer for that, or they're on the committee to help. Others, they assist in the development and kind of explain, like, what do we need? How do we get there? So for FY24, there's a lot of changes back to a lot of ways we used to be. So these are kind of the way it listed in the NOFO. We'll go over a little more on some of these, a little more detail. So under eligibility, now for project types, it's going to offer the hiring activity offers grant support to applications for hiring new additional firefighters. So no more layoff or retentions, it's just new positions. Under allowable project types, they're not going to fund any activity line item that's already currently in your budget. So if you have funding for staff that's vacant, it's not going to fund that. It has to be new positions above your actual level that you have for your budget. There's now the cost sharing. We alluded to this a little bit. There's now required to contribute a cost share. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes. So under cost share, it says that in the first and second years of the grant, the federal funding may not exceed 75% of the usual annual cost of the first year firefighter. And for year 3, it's 35% of the first year firefighter. We'll get a little more detail on that in a minute. Under eligibility, required information verifying cost share. So you're going to have to certify that you have not reduced your budget below 20%, so 80% of what your budget has been for the last 3 years. So saying you can't have just cut your budget to try to get these positions in there. Under additional information, there has to be hazard resistant building codes, basically just saying that you're going to certify that you're trying to get, and it's a trying to get the most current up-to-date building codes in your community. This is another one we often get asked in the international at the office is extensions on the period of performance. A lot of people have money left over. There are no extensions for hiring grants, only for R&R activity. The 3-year grant is the 3-year grant, and that's it. There's no extensions or amendments to if you have excess funds. So let's talk about the cost share. So it's 75% for the first year, 75% for the second year, and 35% for the third year. So that's a lot of money. It's great they're going to give that much. You're responsible for 25% for the first 2 years and 65% for the year 3. The caveat is it's of a first year firefighter salary. There's no step increases, there's no step raises, there's no cost increases, there's no health insurance increases. What you put in for the cost of a year 1 firefighter is what it's going to be for those 3 years. Now, if you say, I'm going to submit for $100,000 for a firefighter, and you actually only spend $90,000, they're only going to reimburse for 75% or 35% of the actual money spent. Not saying, oh, I put in for 100,000, but I only spent 90, so that means they're going to give me the full 90. No, they're going to give you 75% of your actual expenses or 35% of your actual expenses. So this is really just a return to a lot of previous requirements that were in the NOFO for FY19. It's always been in the legislation from FEMA. And what had happened is that we had waivers during COVID for the hiring and things. So that eliminated a lot of the requirements that were there for the match, for the cost share. They're now returning to that. So under the hiring of firefighters activity, again, it's new additional firefighters or change the status of part-time firefighters are paid on call to be full-time firefighters. So somebody that works a regular shift full-time. So the main goal is to improve staffing levels to have adequate personnel to respond and perform in an incident scene. Again, you're no longer able to apply for layoffs, potential layoffs, or anything like that. A lot of times departments were having trouble because you had to have a requirement of putting in in your application a pink slip or a layoff date that they had to be laid off within a certain amount of time of the application. And so a lot of departments are having difficulty with that. So they've completely eliminated that. It's only new positions. For hiring, again, you're not required to keep the personnel after 3 years. They must be new positions not on the payroll. And you have 6 months from the date of award, 180 days actually, to hire before the period of performance starts. Dennis, do you want to take from here?
Sure, and you can go ahead and
Yep.
click your screen and share it over.
I'll click. I don't know if I can you share or you want me to just leave it this way?
You can just leave and click and we'll go through this.
Okay.
So again, the priority here is addressing the NFPA 1710 or 1720. This is to increase service delivery in the public, and don't beat up the reviewers with these references in your narratives. You can reference it once and they'll remember it as you move forward, but you're going to need the data to show where you are now in attaining responses and meeting these standards and where you will be with the project requested firefighters. Okay, that is the highest priority for funding to make that change. So we're told in years that they're going to combine 1710 and 1720 into a new standard completely, but you don't need to worry about reciting the standard in any of your narratives. The reviewers know it. Just how is this going to change your response? What is this going to do for your apparatus, your staffing levels, and how you handle things in your jurisdiction? If you're a combination department, where do these other resources come from? Are they mutual aid resources? Is it a callback situation for some of the career people, or callback for the volunteers in a combination department? But share how it is affecting and how it's going to impact your organization and your responses. Those are the key things as we focus on that 17, 10, and 20. There is AI through the computer system. So if this is something that a grant writer does for your organization and they have a template that they use where they just cut and paste organization names in and submit it through, the computer will pick it up, and clearly the reviewers will pick it up too, because many of the grant writers use the same formatting. They use the same highlighting or bold print, and it's not a quality product. So if your organization uses a grant writer, let them know that these may not get through the computer system, that this type of plagiarism or fabrication is not going to make it work. Whoever in your organization, in the payroll department or the accounts record, or the finance, they're going to need to know and follow these administrative requirements for the post-award to be sure that all the filings are sent in on a regular basis, the reporting of how the money is spent, how much went out, what the timelines were. This is very important that these timelines and these guides are met. So this is the part of the application that you're going to want to have a conversation with the accounting department or whoever is going to be your management specialist in this award. Okay.
Dennis,
Some of the-
I can
Go
say this
ahead.
here. We've gotten several questions about requirements now under the current administration about certain policies and procedures and if you're going to get funded or not. So in the standard terms and conditions that outlines all of those things for filling out documentation and things, you have to certify under the standard terms and conditions as part of your grant that you don't do what the administration does not want you to do, DEI, any of those things. You're not going to engage in any of that during the award or any concept of what they want to do. And along with that, they're saying you must comply with all executive orders. And most of this has always been there for following orders and laws and such of the administration. With that. So Dennis, you can go ahead.
Yeah, some of that's a changing landscape, but ultimately it doesn't adversely affect if your department is hired, giving points for military service or different things like that, then your general hiring practices, as you've done in the past, is going to be what your guidelines and what you're going to follow. Most organizations are going to hire appropriately to keep themselves from getting into trouble legally of picking these candidates over those different candidates. So basically, their questions can talk about your hiring practices and how you've done it and what you're going to follow to hire these new hire employees. But ultimately, some of the executive orders, those would be a question we could run through the help desk at FEMA, or you can run it up the chain to us, and we'll go through our sources and try and find a specific question if you feel it's going to directly impact your traditional hiring process as you go through with that. Okay, so best practices. Start now. The sooner you can start and get your application going, the better. There's a lot of this stuff that is going to take some time to pull the data together, whether it's response data for the last 3 years or on-the-job injuries, line of duty deaths, fatalities in the public, different things like that. But start getting this stuff pulled together. Pull together what your infrastructure is. I know some of the things we look for in that infrastructure. Everybody covers highways, hospitals, schools, and those type of things. But put numbers to it. Back it up with data. How many miles of divided highway do you cover? And what's the average traffic flow per day? How many miles of rail do you cover? And what's the traffic flow? What is the total student and staff population of the schools in your area? So put some numbers to these things to really give perspective to the reviewers what your jurisdiction is. If you're lacking in response in a given area, this is going to show that these new firefighters are going to help with response to these different areas. So we need to get an idea on that. There's get ready guides that are available online. Just walk you through the process. It's not a big, scary process. Many times we see the people assigned to help out with this are in light duty assignment in admin, or they may be doing it for a couple of years and you realize it's not as hard and a daunting task as it comes on pot. The self-evaluation sheets are a good reference for you as well. It lets you know the key points of the responses to the questions asked in the applications. Answer the questions. Less is more. Okay. You don't need to fill all the spaces just because it gives you that much more space per character. Be careful of placeholders, as it says there. There are sometimes applications will get all the way to the review process, and there's a placeholder in it. It'll have a series of X's or some other placeholder, and it says, Shannon in HR will fill this section in later. And then it allows you to move on in the application as you're completing it. It doesn't read that as incomplete. That gets listed as that section is done. And if you don't go back and do that, then you're going to miss out on those scoring points. So as you send your narratives into us, we will highlight that and be sure and bring that to your attention that you need to go back and take care of those place markers as you're answering the questions. One of the big things too is we want this to be about your department, your local stories. Don't reference national standards if you can't bring it back home and tie it into your department. We get that firefighters are 3 times more likely to get cancer, but if you can bring it back and say that in your organization, you've had 17 that have been diagnosed in the last 3 years, that's a great way to tell it and to bring those stories home. The reviewers want to know what this is going to be for your organization. How is this going to impact your daily service delivery in every aspect, not just on fire-related calls under 1710? How is it going to help on medical calls, on hazmat calls? You go to the senior center for lift assists. Well, now you're going to have an extra set of hands to help out on those incidents as well. So we want that answered in your questions when it talks about how are these firefighters going to be used? How are they going to impact your service delivery? Because you're not meeting those standards now. What's wrong with your current situation? We all know that there's staffing standards out there that the safest thing to keep firefighters safe is more firefighters. Put that in your narrative. How are these firefighters going to help keep your firefighters safer? If you tell us that it's going to reduce injuries, well, then I'm going to go back in your data and I want to see that you've had some firefighter injuries in the last 3 years. If you stated you had none, then it's hard for me to correlate how this is going to reduce injuries when there have been none stated in that other part of the application. It all needs to tie together in a full package so that the reviewers get a full understanding of these best practices, what your application is going to do for your organization. Okay. Moving on, we talk about your vulnerability, your financial need. We need to know why you can't afford to pay for these people yourself. What type of state or local fiscal restrictions does your department have to work under? Is there a state guideline that says you can't increase your millage above a certain point? Are there other guidances from the state statutorily that keep you from raising money? Have you gone to the electorate to try and raise your mill election in a while? If so, put it in there. We want to see what you've done to try and raise these money. If the got turned down at the voters, let us know. When you put these things in there, remember time relevance. Time relevance should be somewhere within the last 3 to 5 years. Often we see people put in there, well, the economic downturn of 2008, that was quite a while ago. Or, well, since COVID, it's been 2020. That's 5 years. How has your organization survived economically in 5 years to move forward? If that you haven't rebounded from that because you've lost businesses, homes have moved out, different things, have some data to back up your words. How much business? How did that affect your city's budget? They lost 6%, 8%, or if you can put an extra dollar amount to it, wonderful. If you're a fire district and you're under some type of other taxing funding mechanisms that takes money from your budget, put that in there as well. Let us know financially why you can't afford to do this. How is this impacting your organization? Okay. Next slide talks about the AFG program, the help desk. Remember, we're dealing with this from a firefighter safety standpoint. And if firefighters are safer, then the public is safer. This is our reference back to these different questions. This is your service delivery in your organization for the day to provide this level of service to the community. Again, remember, you're trying to increase your NFPA performance, but it doesn't need to be referenced in each one of your narratives. Same thing with your organization name. State it fully, give a acronym, NMFD for North Metro Fire District. That's fine. Now you can use we, us, our, save those characters for more of your narrative to explain other aspects of your questions so that we can get a full response in there. As they mentioned, shoot it off to us with the local president authorization. We'll take a look at it and get it back to you. Okay. Mark, what else you think we got?
Well, that's great, Dennis. As we go through, so we just don't like bullet pointed narratives. Make it flow, make it read, make it appropriate. So that the faster we can read it, the better we can score it, the better it is. You really don't want to piss off the reviewer as they go through saying and doing stupid things. So moving on with this, so the help desk and FEMA resources are available. If you have a program question, you can reach out to them. They're really good answering questions about stuff. We're pretty much wrapping this up here. We're here to help. The IAFF Grants Office is here to help. We can answer questions. We can try to find answers for you if we don't have an answer or contact. We are able to do the narrative review, which I can't stress enough how important that is before you submit to your application to FEMA. We catch a lot of little things that, if they don't make sense to us, are not going to make sense to another reviewer. Dennis and I are primarily who does the reviews, and we've read an awful lot of applications over the years, and we're pretty good at picking out the little things that are really annoy your reviewer or hurt your application. So we can't stress enough, firegrants@iaff.org. We're here to help. This is what we do. This is paid for by your local dues. Like, this is part of what the IAFF does for you is one of these things. Our goal as IAFF members and IAFF workers is to make sure you have the best number of firefighters you possibly can in your department, and we're here to help pretty much any way we can through this process. We'll open it up to questions. I don't know if there's been any questions in the chat or in the Q&A. If you have questions, please, I don't know if we can open mics up or not. We can send them to us. We'll be here for a little bit to answer questions. I see one.
So Mark,
says
if you want to, you can either drop a question in the chat, or you can raise your hand if you'd rather ask your question live. I do want to ask Mark real quick if you could just kind of reiterate, because we've gotten several questions about the ability to use SAFER to retain firefighters who were previously hired by a SAFER grant. Can you kind of speak a little bit more about how that's changed from previous years? Because we've gotten several questions on that, and then we'll move into the Q&A.
Unfortunately, you can no longer, not that you actually really ever could use, but you cannot retain firefighters you currently have. So if you have 100 firefighters and you apply for this grant, you have to have 100 plus whatever you applied for. You cannot retain or maintain any firefighters on this. You can't just extend a SAFER grant or any of those things that way.
Thank you. What I'll do is I'll catch the participants who have their hand raised, and then we'll move into the Q&A box. So Ross, and it'll be Ross and then Sam. So Ross, you should be good to go.
Yes, thank you for putting this on. I did have a quick question, and just so you know, the chat's disabled, so I couldn't submit through the chat. But I did have a question. We've looked at doing a SAFER grant in the past, and we did have a reserve amount that I was told was too much to be able to apply, essentially. Is that still, now we've spent most of it, we've spent a lot of it down. We bought some land for a new station. We're looking to hire for the new station, but Indiana tax law has changed dramatically this year. And we are not going to be able to hire, and if we don't hire, we're not going to build. Is that, is the is the reserves amount a certain amount that um, has to be a certain number or a certain percentage, or is
I can
that not
answer.
included
Let me
in
answer that for you, Russ. So basically, as a FEMA reviewer, as FEMA, there's no reserve amount that's going to preclude you from applying or being awarded. What happens is you tell us that I have $100 million in reserves. I'm going to look at that. I'm going to go, wow, that's a lot of money. I want to know what it's used for, and you can't touch it. So in your narrative for financial need, you're like, we have $100 million in reserves or whatever the number is, but that money is earmarked for X, Y, and Z, so that you can't use that money for hiring. Some places have to have a reserve because of a payroll in case that the world ended, they'd be able to pay payroll for 6 months or until tax receipts come in. So whatever your number is that you have is fine with me. I don't care what your budget is. You just have to explain where your money comes from, where it goes, that all of it's being used for something. Now, if you tell me I have $10 million in reserve and there's no reason for it, we're like, wait, why can't you use that to hire these people and staff the station or build the station?
Okay, so the explanation is just the most important part of that. So, like, we have a
Yes.
$14 million budget. We had at the time last year we had about 10 million in reserves, but we spent a lot of that down buying a new engine in preparation for the station. We spent buying land. Now we're down to about 5 probably, and so the explanation for that is, well, this is also a a deterrent in case of an economy issue um, or just in case something were to happen like this year. We had a huge overhaul in the Indiana tax code, and that is there just in case we need it for personnel issues. That is an okay answer to those questions.
Right. As long as you say that it's earmarked for another purpose and cannot be used for staffing.
Okay, perfect. Okay, that's all I need to know. I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys putting this on.
Thanks, Russ.
All right, Sam, you are up next.
Awesome. Appreciate this. This is super helpful. My specific question is, we have a small combination department, currently staffed 24/7, 10, looking to staff a second body on the engines. Now, looking at the NOFO compliance priorities, obviously you're going to get a high if you're coming closer to bringing into complete compliance with 1710. Going 2.0 is not going to get as close to the 4 that's required. My question is, what parts of 1710 qualify you for those compliance priorities? And is there anything we can do to kind of raise the level of compliance without going to 4.0?
Well, I think the big thing is how it's going to affect your staffing. I mean, we understand that butts in the seat are expensive. It's the biggest expense that an organization has. So to suddenly jump to 4-person staffing is costly. But any increase in staffing is going to change your response. And maybe currently you're meeting 1710 guidelines 30% of the time. This proposed staffing increase, we're going to take you to 70% of the time. That's a huge increase for your organization. So that is what it's going to increase. And that's going to be what we'll look at as reviewers to be impacted.
As far as 1710 specifically or 1720, FEMA only cares about the response standard, not actual people in the seats. It's specifically the response standard. The arrival, the apparatus, the assembly standard. Sorry, the assembly people on scene. So if this is adding a second body in the seat, even with mutual aid, is going to help you get there faster, then that's what I would work off of and count with. Most importantly, as a reviewer, I personally think that adding a second or third body is going to be more important than adding, the fourth body. Going from 2 to 3 is more important than 3 to 4, and obviously 1 to 2 is huge. So that's what you talk about. Your biggest issue is going to get through computer scoring is going to be that question that asks, what percent are you now? What percent will you be 1710 or 20 compliance? That's where you really need to look at your assembly requirement and how you can do that. Is it mutual aid? Is it callback? How is it doing it? And how fast will this extra body get you there?
Awesome. I appreciate the input.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, Jeremy Irvine, you are up next.
Aloha and good morning. I just had a quick question about I believe the stat was 90% of the funding goes for hiring, 10% for recruitment and retention. I just had a question if you could give some examples of the projects or whatever that were successful with that recruitment and retention funding.
So recruitment and retention is only going to be available to volunteer departments. So we really don't usually work with that side of the house. If you were eligible for that, we could certainly answer a question offline for that. But R&R can be anything from incentives to, I think they'll do some clothing giveaway stuff, to stipends, to
Education.
education, a number of different factors that work in for getting more volunteers and volunteer departments. We usually don't touch that, like I said, because we talk about hiring, and career departments are not eligible, and combination departments are only eligible if they have volunteered, just paid call departments.
All right, copy that. Thank you.
No problem.
All right, Jared Uselman.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. First off, thank you guys very much for doing this. I think it clears up a lot of things. I think I spent some time with Dennis actually a couple years ago at the Oregon State Educational event at the hospitality room. So it's good to see he's still helping with this. My questions are maybe a little general, and I have a few. The first one is in regards to financial standings of like a municipality, would the municipal financial analysis of a municipality have any impact or overriding impact versus like what our current budget or budget increases are when we're applying?
I think it's important to look at that, or if you included that in your narrative, to say that you have done an MFA on your organization and you can see that money is tight, money is earmarked for special projects, and there is not an excess left over for staffing. That's a good reference. The reviewers will know that you're looking at all potential monies that your city or district has available. And I think that's good to look at it from that standpoint.
And one thing with a budget increase, it across from anybody, if you have an increase year over year in your budget, address why. We see a lot of times a budget will go up $1 million or $2, $3 million with no explanation. And as a reviewer, I start to question, wait, you're telling me how broke you are as a community, how much financial need you have, but don't address why my budget went up. It can be as simple as saying our budget appears to have gone up, and it's only due to contractual increases or staffing or labor increases or the cost of goods, or we bought an engine, or we have to finance our fire station through our budget. Just address any cost increase as why it's there. It doesn't have to be long. The reviewer just wants to understand what's going on in your community and your budget for the last several years.
Copy. Thank you. And the other one, so I'm currently in the process. I actually just went through the objection phase with our Oregon Employee Relations Board, and I'm organizing a local or a shop under our local that's much smaller and in much more need. Not to say that our small local isn't as needed in as much need as well, but I'm looking at both of these locals, and we're mutual aid partners. They are not currently, they don't have a contract, but they through the objection phase, and they are now framework in place. Does that make things difficult, or do you think that could be more advantageous for that shop to be able to be applicable to this grant?
Well, I don't know that it's necessarily based on whether or not they've got a work agreement. They still need to show the financial need, impact on daily services, enhanced firefighter and public safety. It still comes down to their responses to the questions in the application process. And one of the simple things that we look for to let the reviewers know that they're local in good standing is this a joint labor management project. That's usually one of the key phrases that we like people to put in there so that we know, okay, the locals are aware of it. Management isn't going off spending money in some area that hasn't been discussed with the local. And if they can say they've got this is their safer application is a joint labor management project, then that's fine.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys. And I think the biggest thing that made this easier to swallow is that there's $3.3 billion of requests. And I think that makes me feel a little bit better that maybe the applications in the past aren't that bad. It's just the competition's pretty steep. So thank you guys.
Send them to us to review and we can help streamline it a little bit.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on, Greg Markley. Good to see you, sir.
All right. Hey, thank you. Hey, thanks guys for doing this. And I know it can be a bit exhausting grading these. So a couple questions. One, you'd mentioned that showing a big increase from on first response as far as effective firefighting force, and they have those percentages, 10 to 29%, 30 to 49, whatever they are, right? And you'd mentioned if you can show a big change in that category, that's a very positive. But in my department, I'm putting in for a grant to, we have 3 ladder trucks, looking at a 4-person staffing on the third one. And, so we only have to hire 6 people. And it doesn't change that, I can say it's going from one position where we're at now as far as that effective firefighting. We're only adding 1 person minimum. So, does that look bad necessarily? I guess we could up it to 1 category. And then the other question is, you as graders, is there this fatigue you get? Some of in the narrative section, it's like you can put 4,000 characters. And I've always been sensitive to, writing too much because it just looks too long and just too cumbersome for you, as opposed that I can do it. I can, summarize everything that I'm asking for in 2,000 characters. Does that matter to you guys as far as the length of some of the responses?
To answer your second question first, we do get fatigue and you get really tired of reading a lot of the same BS over and over again. So my advice is always use as many characters you need to make your point effective and not any more. If you can say what you need to say in a question in 2,000 characters and answer and justify, awesome. Some people it takes 3,000 to 4,000 characters to get, because they have a complicated story, to get that point across. Other times it's like, why are you telling me this? You already told me this 3 times. I don't need to know. There. A lot of times you'll see those people try to quote the NFPA standards and it's like takes up a ton of characters I don't need to read. We always joke it's a drinking game around the table as to how many times you can read the word NFPA. It just, you get really tired of seeing that. So it's just, we want to see the best answer to your question, the questions, without any additional fluff. We don't need to hear how wonderful the world is or all that stuff. Like, we know we're firefighters. Dennis and I are both firefighters. We've been firefighters for a long time. We understand most of the people reviewing are firefighters. You don't need to explain to us a lot of stuff. As far as
we can help you dance around some of the different explanations too. If you have had a legislative issue with funding, I know here in Colorado we've got the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which has adversely affected funding for a lot of years. Well, you can make that little explanation, but we'll advise you not to put in that it's been in effect for 25 years, because you make a similar financial need point by saying, here's something legislatively that affects our funding on an ongoing basis. Great, short, sweet, to the point. You don't need to backfill with all that other stuff. Mark is spot on that we don't need to hear the 4,000 count characters. If you can do it in 2, great. That's wonderful.
So the answer to your first part of the question about the 70-10 percentages and the extra person on the engine or the truck. So there's 2 separate points. You get a pre-score. All the applications go through what they call a pre-score. So there's all those radio buttons and check boxes that say, where do you do this? Do you do that? What will you be able to do? So for that specific one, it's what is your current percentage of 17, 10, or 20 compliance? And what will it be if you're awarded the staffing? That is a highly graded score by FEMA. And that's one of those, if you don't answer a large percentage of change in that, then it's not going to score well pre-score. And the pre-score and our score as reviewers is combined, so it'll lower your overall score. So that has to be a high change, however that works out to be. So it's the assembly requirement stuff. So if that extra person on the truck or two people on the truck is going to make you get there faster. So, you know, if now you can do it at the second or third arriving company and not the fifth arriving company, you know, is that going to now reduce that time to be now more compliant? You need to look internally to that way. As far as a reviewer, I'm going to read it and go, as long as you explain why you need it and what that extra person is going to do for you and how important the extra butt in the seat is going to be, that's going to be my goal with it. Now, if you tell me that you do it, you know, I have 5-person staffing in every company, but I don't meet 1710 now for assembly in, you know, 8 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever the number is, I'm going to be like, wait a second. And then you tell me, well, I'm going to be 100%, we're adding one person. It's like, well, let's look at that again. I'll go back and start to read. And if I have to dig deep in your application, it's probably not going to score super well, personally. So make sure you answer the question appropriately as best you can to that number. Look at your response, look at your statistical data you have through your CAD system and your arrival numbers and go, wait, this one extra person is going to make a huge difference in that number. I'll get there quicker. So now I can say, yeah, we'll meet that 70 to 80% of the time or 90 to 100% of the time, versus now we meet it 20% of the time. Look in the NOFO, it'll give the exact statistical value of high, medium, low for that question. But that's a huge question for FEMA side.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we've had several questions come in through the Q&A box. Mark and Dennis, would it be easier if I read them aloud, or do you just want to go through them and answer them as
why don't you read them, and that way everyone can hear the question, and then we can do that.
Yeah.
Okay. First question, what % of grants are approved versus not approved? And is there a difference for larger municipalities versus smaller cities, which tend to be more successful?
So the percentage was 9% last year was funded across all applications. So R&R and hiring. I don't know the breakdown of R&R versus hiring percentage as to what was actually funded. And then the second part of the question about larger cities or smaller cities, I think a lot comes down to the ask, what they're asking for versus the smaller places asking for, and the realistic application. Putting a realistic application, if you have a small department, you're asking for 30 people and you only have 10 on staff, it's going to be a huge ask. If you have 300 people on staff and you're asking for 5 people, that is a much different application. So I think that's the case. I don't know the statistical breakdown between places. I don't know if they have that number that says what's better to apply for. Some of it comes down to that 1710 assembly and the answer to the question about percentage of increase. A lot of people answer that and say, oh, it's not going to help us at all, and that's going to kill your score right there.
All right, next question. Our department is currently staffed with 1. We would be applying to go to 2. This still leaves us far from NFPA compliance. Essentially, the question is, will FEMA still approve an application even if the requested staffing doesn't bring them to NFPA 1710?
Was Sam's question. I think we answered that already.
Okay.
I don't think the 2-0 versus 1-0, it goes back to that assembly requirement, and can you justify it to everyone and make it a good story to explain to everybody?
And I think as part of that too, if this is going to make a difference in your service delivery, something I'm going to look for is, are you going to be able to sustain and keep these people on the job? A good sustainability statement is going to be carrying a lot of weight with a lot of the reviewers. They want to see firefighters that are going to be there for 25 to 30 years. They don't want somebody to have the job for 3 years when funding runs out, say, oh, well, see ya, off to truck driving school or something else down the road. So even if you're a small organization, you can show where you've got commitments from your local political affiliates, your governing board, different revenue streams are going to be changed in 3 years and you're going to be able to retain these positions, give it a shot. I think that's good.
All right, next question. Staffing levels are down approximately 20% with minimum manning. This creates unprecedented forced overtime. Is this a burden? Is this a type of burden that SAFER would look to alleviate? Essentially forced overtime.
One, SAFER does address the fact that reducing overtime is still a priority for them. As a reviewer, it's a little different. It's allowable. It's okay to do, but we like to make sure there's more firefighters arriving at the fire scene all the time. And just reducing overtime doesn't make a good story. Explaining, maintaining that staffing and increasing staffing and better staffing definitely makes the better story. Dennis, thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. That's an additional benefit, is reducing the overtime budget and moving those funds from the overtime line item into regular personnel line. But I think show us and tell us the story of the benefits to full staff, increased staffing.
All right. Next question. I'm with an emergency services district in Texas. I've been told that we would not qualify or considered for a SAFER grant because we are an ESD and not a municipality. Is that true?
Oh, we know we've done many ESDs, especially in Texas, along the way. And as long as you are the primary response district for an area, that's okay. Service districts, county, regional are all eligible, as long as you meet the eligibility requirements through the NOFO. And that's basically a department that covers primary response municipal area, not federal fund, not federal department, not a private for-profit fire department. Then you should be eligible.
All right. Next question. Is it more important in SAFER's eyes to have 17 firefighters on a fire or 4 firefighters on an engine company?
I think it comes down to effectiveness. What is going to meet that guideline of answering the question in the application of getting number of personnel on scene in the given timeline? What have you had effectiveness with in your community, and what do you hope these new hires are going to change to improve that?
I agree. It's on the letter of the NOFO, it's the assembly requirement. For the reviewer, it's telling the story of what these members are going to do for you and make your firefighters and communities safer. If you're applying to add a third to each apparatus and it's still going to get your assembly requirement, that's amazing. If you're going to get 4 in an apparatus and do the same thing, that's great. If you only have 1 engine in your department, adding the 4th is going to be really important to you to get that there. And you need to look at your mutual aid or your callback or your volunteer, however else you staff the rest of your department, to make sure you can, say you're going to meet that response standard somewhere in there. Now, I don't need to hear it in my narratives, on the narratives. I just need to know you said it. So you are going to comply. Tell me the story. Make it a good story.
All right. Excuse me. Can you link news articles and narratives to help tell your story?
So, no. You can't put any links or any hyperlinks or any references. This came up earlier. I was having a conversation. We don't need to see you cite your work. If you tell me a certain story, I'm going to believe it's true. If you tell me that you have whatever going on, we're going to believe it's true. You're telling me that. You're submitting this. You're basically saying, I'm not lying. I don't need to see a news story. I don't need to see it linked. Now, if it's a good story, tell me the story. Paint the picture. If it explains your situation, tell it to us. We want to hear it. I love a good story. I always say, if you can make the reviewer cry at the table, you win. We've seen several across the way, just tragic stories about people getting killed, firefighters or civilians, and not enough staff to get them. I mean, that's the compelling story. Linking a news article, no one's going to look at it. We can't click on it. They tell us we can't research anything on our own. We don't need to know that. We don't need to see it. You don't need to cite to say that, whatever statistic you say, 100,000 cars come through my community. I don't need to see a link to your DOT. I don't need to see a link to the TV story. It doesn't matter to the reviewer. It's going to waste characters, and we're just going to skip over it and maybe miss something good.
Yeah, also along that same line, you can't have the mayor or your local House representative or senator, somebody send in a letter supporting this. Now, you can say in a narrative that you have support from these people. You can state that, but having them send a letter, that doesn't get to the reviewers, and we'll never see it.
All right. Has a SAFER grant ever been awarded in an effort to reduce a work week?
Does this mean, I think, go from 56 to 42, I think would be the question.
I would assume so, yes.
I don't know if there's ever been one awarded. There's no reason why it wouldn't be awarded. I mean, basically, as long as you justify the story as to what's going on as kind of the situation, basically, I would set it up as you're already doing this is going to reduce your firefighters per shift to X, and these firefighters are going to make up that difference, the new firefighters. I don't think I've ever seen one that would be not awarded, as long as it's a good story. I don't know, Dennis, have you?
I think if a department is making that transition, and this application is part of the hiring process for this program, I think that's fine. Now, if they're looking at SAFER as the driver of the program to reduce your number of work week hours, that might be harder to make that story connect. If this is an ongoing priority of the organization, they've found sleep issues, injuries, accidents, what have you, are more frequent at the 56-hour work week than they are at the 48 or some reduced work week, and that's your driver, okay, then show with stata, this is the injuries we've had, these are the occurrences, we're starting down this road. Last year we hired this many people, we saw this reduction, we want to continue that process. That's what these new hires are going to be for. I think we could make that work.
All right. For a department that is contractually set to go to a 42-hour work week, but the city doesn't want to fund the staffing increase, would this be entertained by FEMA? So I think kind of along the same lines as the last question.
Yeah, same answer, basically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What is the timeline if an application is approved for the grant to be awarded?
That's a FEMA. I mean, we do peer review at a certain point. So the money has to be awarded for this fiscal year, or any fiscal year, by September 30th. So if the application for this case is due July 3rd, peer review is set for the middle of August. So it's going to be early September for this one. There's no set from the time the application is received till they're awarded. Once awarded, if you get an award, you have 180 days to do the hiring. And then from there, the application starts, or as soon as you complete the hiring process, within those 180 days, the 3-year period of performance starts. But FEMA doesn't have, they'd like to say they have a timeline to award. The NOFO has a timeline to award, but there's a lot of other factors that go in with it because of the amount of money and levels of approval that have to do. This year, I don't know with other statements that are going to need to get done from FEMA to finally actually award money. AFG closed in December, I think. I don't remember when AFG closed, and we still haven't seen awards for AFG yet, so it could be there. The money has to be out by September 30th.
All right. And all right, so for example, can a department ask for 50 total, 30 to add a third person to every truck, and 20 to reduce the work week and be chosen for just the, basically, can a SAFER grant be partially awarded, I think is the question.
No, there's no partial awards. For SAFER, it's all or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you ask for is what's going to get scored, reviewed, and submitted. So there's no way to say that, oh, we're going to do this and this. They're the same project, the same application. It's all scored the same. It's not like AFG where they can decide to reduce your award and say, we only want to fund the air bottles and not the air packs, for example. So no, it's all or nothing.
Okay.
And back to, so hiring 50 people is a huge amount of people. I know Dennis and I have talked about this many times with each other, that if it's like a high percentage of the awarded money, if you're asking for $30 million and there's only 300 million to available, and you're asking for 10% of the money for one department, that's an ask a lot of reviewers will look at and go, wait a second. Applications should be realistic numbers of what's manageable and able to keep. I know in some places when you have 10,000 members or 5,000 members in your department and you're looking to add, that it's not a lot to you, but to the reviewer, if I can add, 3 to 10 departments or 30 to 1, a lot of reviewers start to question that amount of money in that. So make your ask realistic and appropriate for what the program is.
And tell the story. You have to have that compelling story. If you want 30 people, then there should be some really compelling stories and response issues that you are unable to meet right now with your current staffing levels, that this is going to change. For firefighter safety, for public safety, there's going to be some dramatic changes.
All right. 2 volunteer departments were combined and created a new combination department. Are battalion chiefs and training officers eligible to be funded under a SAFER grant?
Under a hiring grant, no. For a career fire department or combination fire department, no. They're not eligible, only entry-level firefighters. If you are a volunteer fire department requesting hiring and you have no career members, you can ask for some, and I don't know the exact positions, you'd have to look in the NOFO, certain officer positions that you can ask for, but only if you are a volunteer department hiring for the first time. Career departments and combination departments are only eligible under SAFER for new entry-level firefighters, boots on the street.
All right. Do we have to increase minimum staffing 1-for-1 for each position requested, or can we ask for more positions to cover Kelly days, paid time off, such as hiring 4 firefighters for every minimum staffing increase of 1?
Go ahead,
Dennis.
In the application, it talks about what you do for a hiring, how you hiring process, what your ratio is. Most organizations will have a 1.2 to sometimes a 1.7 hiring for every vacancy, taking into account sick, overtime, vacation, that type of thing. So look at the questions in the application. If it addresses what your hiring factor is, then that's where that explanation would go. And if you want 7 people and there's really only 4 openings right now, but that's going to cover you to increase this staffing to meet this goal and responses for the jurisdiction, then that's fine. You just have to justify it in your narratives why you're getting more than the open vacancies for your minimum staffing.
The question that asks how will you use these firefighters in the narrative, it's a scored question in the project description. You're going to explain in there, we're going to put 1 extra person on each engine or whatever it is, and we're asking for an additional firefighter to cover the overtime, sick time, that way to help reduce overtime. Our staffing factor is whatever it is in there as well. It's okay, but you just need to justify it to the reviewer. That's the best thing, main thing is justifying it to the reviewer.
All right. If you could just real quickly go through the matching requirements again and how it differs from really the last few years, where the cost share has been waived.
For the last 4 or 5 years, it's been 100% on FEMA for 3 years. They've gone back to the FY19 requirements of a cost match, cost share. So for the first 2 years, it's 75% on FEMA. The third year is 35% on FEMA, with no requirement to keep the people after the period of performance still. It's also over first year firefighter. There's no cost increases, no salary increases, no step increases. It's whatever that cost is of the first year firefighter for those 3 years. They don't give you any option in the application to increase those numbers. Whatever you put in for year 1 firefighter is what it is, and it's of actual expenses. So you can't say, and they're going to look at that and that's what they're going to pay. You can't say next year is a little higher actual expenses. They're going to go back to the first year number. Basically, that number is going to be the same for the entire, they're going to give you whatever that number is for the X number of years you have the person, the 3 years you have them. There's no increases. And
Even if your work agreement says in year 2, there's gonna be this type of raise to salary, in year 3, there's gonna be this type of raise, the organization's gonna have to cover that. That
that's
is
an
made
important
part of
part.
that allowable grant coverage.
You can pay them, but they're not going to, FEMA's not going to give you the money for it.
Yeah.
All right. We typically get letters of support from federal politicians. Do letters from state and local politicians help?
So if it's to the FEMA person, no. FEMA does not, they'll take that letter. It doesn't matter. The reviewer doesn't see it. It does not increase your score. This is truly a peer-reviewed and scored program. Where those, and Dennis is a much better lobbyer than I am, where those letters come in importance is to show your politicians the importance of this program. That they feel, you know, that if you don't tell them how important this program is to you, then next year when funding comes up for it, they don't care about it. So that's where the letters of support come in, is really on the reverse side of who's giving that letter. That's more important to them.
Also, with regard to elected officials, the local elected officials, if they're supportive of the department and their application process, that's good. If they're supportive of your sustainment program, they're supportive of keeping these people for the next 25 to 30 years. City council is behind it. The mayor supports it. Put that in your narrative. And again, with the federal officials, awards go out to them on Thursdays, and then the department is notified on Fridays. So if you have a relationship with them, Mark's spot on. Have the conversation with them. Tell them, hey, this is an important program. This helps out community departments. Yeah, talk to them, but we're not going to carry any weight with that they're supportive of your application from a peer reviewer standpoint.
Don't tell them that when you ask for the letter.
Yeah.
Make them think they're really important and they like to give this stuff to us, but.
All right, I'll take these next two. Is there a webinar similar to this for FP&S? No, there is not. Just generally because that's not something that most of our affiliates are looking for. However, if you have specific questions about the fire prevention and safety program, please email firegrants@iaff.org and we'll be happy to help you as best we can. But no, there's not a FP&S webinar. The next question is about the Drug-Free Workplace Act and if it allows off-duty use of marijuana, and does that make the department ineligible for a grant? And the answer is no. And full disclosure, I am not an attorney, but I can say I've ran into this question before, and our IAFF legal team has weighed in on it. Essentially, the Drug-Free Workplace Act only requires that federal grant recipients discourage the use of drugs at the work site and punish convictions for employee drug use. However, if you have a local or state law on the books that does allow for the off-duty use of marijuana, it has no impact on your ability to apply for a safer grant. In terms of, and as it relates to the Drug-Free Workplace Act, it doesn't require that grant recipients, or it doesn't make federal grant recipients ineligible for federal programs just because of that. So, and I would say, again, I'm not an attorney, so please follow up with your in-house legal counsel regarding that. But as a general statement, no, just because you have local or state laws on the books that do allow for off-duty marijuana use, that doesn't mean your department is ineligible for a federal grant. I think this next one is a rewording of a previous question. It appears that an increase of minimum staffing, i.e. going from 2 members to 3 on a ladder, is more of a priority than leaving minimum manning the same, but increasing our overall staffing to reduce overtime costs. Does that?
Yeah, Matt. So I understand what you're asking. It's going to be, it's hard to say. If you don't say you're increasing your daily staffing, then a reviewer is not going to care really much about it. the staffing, boots on the street, getting to the scene is the most important part of this. Reducing overtime is a great added benefit to the whole project, but if you're not getting me more people to the fireground scene, then it's not going to score well. You're not going to have any increase in your 1710 compliance. You're not going to have any increase. You can't justify it to me except reduction in overtime, the entire narrative. And there are much more compelling applications about safety and firefighter safety that are out there. And so it won't score as well as if you were actually increasing your daily staffing. A benefit with that would be reducing overtime to say, listen, we currently staff at 20 per shift. We have 30 on staff to 20 per shift. With a new grant, we're going to add 3 people per shift, so we'll staff at 22. And so you're giving me some increase, but you're still having a reduction. You're still saving some overtime. But to just increase staffing to reduce overtime is not going to score very well.
All right, 2 more questions. And I think this is a follow-up from a previous question. So the links from news stories won't be in the narratives, but should sources be mentioned, such as traffic volume that is sourced by DOT, Department of Transportation?
You don't need to cite a source, but you could say, according to the Mass DOT, and you don't have to spell it out. We all know what DOT means. You can say, according to the Mass DOT, 100,000 cars drive through my community every day, an increase over the last 10 years or 5 years or 3 years, that way. But if you're going to tell me that you're the single busiest fire department in the state, then I don't need a cite for that. That's you telling me that. That's going to be considered whatever you say it is for most things. So you don't need to cite. You don't need to have footnotes. You don't need to have any of that stuff. It's really not going to work. There's no formatting in the narratives to allow for it. So you really don't need to say it in there unless it's a pertinent fact to say, you didn't come up with this number on your own. Like the Mass DOT said this. That's okay. So it's kind of a pick and choose as to what you need to cite your facts with for things, but you don't need to cite everything.
All right, and the last question, I'll take this one. Is there a way to set up a meeting with the IAFF prior to writing our narrative, or is assistance only available after it is written? So we will not write the narratives for you. Unfortunately, we don't have the staffing to be able to write grant applications for every department. But we can certainly help guide you through the application process and give you tips to how to best word and write your narrative. So please reach out to us at firegrants@iaff.org if we can help with that. And of course, we will be able to review your completed application prior to submitting it, which, by the way, is on July 3rd this year. So please be mindful of that and give us enough time. We ask that you submit your application drafts to us as early as possible. So that if there are recommended changes that come from the IAFF, you have enough time to consider and make those changes prior to submitting on July 3rd. So please be mindful of the application deadline. And that was the last question that we had. Does anybody else have any questions before we wrap up?
With regard to that deadline on July 3rd, Mark and I always tell people, you want your application done and hit that submit button at least 2 to 3 days before the end of the application period. You don't want it to get caught in somewhere in the cloud, some internet issue or something like that, that suddenly it arrives there beyond the 5 p.m. timeline. That's East Coast time. So wherever you're at, take that into account, but give yourself those extra couple days. And as Jamie mentioned, give us the time to do it. Send it in. We're more than happy to go back and forth 2 or 3 times if we need to with you on these things. But start now, get it going. We can review 2 narratives and you get the other 4 done later this week, then send those in when they're done. We're here to help.
Many times there's had to be, when regards to the question about can we help you ahead of time, we've had many a Zoom meeting with the people or a phone conversation, answer questions before narratives are written. It's important to get stuff to us as soon as you can, because there's only, so many of us that can do this as quick as we can. We also have other, full-time jobs within our fire departments and stuff. So it's really important to get information to us so we can get it back to you as soon as possible for rewrites, for things. I know there's always somebody that sends one to us Thursday night before it's due, and we're scrambling to get it back to them as quick as we can, but there's only so much we can do, and there's only so fast we can do it.
All right. Well, I want to appreciate everybody for taking time on their Friday afternoon to sit in on this webinar. I certainly hope that you found it informative. I want to thank Mark and Dennis and Dr. Smith and Scott Dennis, who's on the call as well, for all their assistance that they provide to bring this service to the members. If you would like a copy of the recording or the slide deck, please email firegrants@iaff.org. And of course, if you have any questions, either as you're crafting your application or after you've already drafted it and you just want us to review it, again, please work with your local president and contact, again, firegrants at IAFF.org. Again, I want to thank you for your time this afternoon. I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend, and we look forward to working with you. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you for coming.
Have a good one.